Friends, today I'm bringing you an opening that's gonna win you many games. Super easy to play for starters, and it'll also bring you incredible results because people don't know how to play against it. That's the most important thing of all. We've seen this opening on the channel before, but today we're gonna go a little bit deeper. We're talking about the bishop's opening, bishop to c4. Alright, we're used to, right? Playing knight to f3 normally as a first move to attack this pawn to keep the initiative. However, bishop to c4 as a first move is almost never seen in any game. That's why it hides so many secrets, and there are many advantages to not having developed this knight to f3. We're going to see it next. I've brought a board with coordinates today, so you can follow me even better while I give my explanations. I hope you like this type of board with coordinates. If so, let me know in the comments, because, I always read them. Alright, how are we going to play when we make the move bishop to c4? Well, the most typical response for black is to play knight to f6. Why? Well, logically, they're developing one of their four minor pieces, and also, and this is the most important thing of all, they're threatening this pawn right here. In other words, it's the only developing move. That maintains the initiative because it forces us to defend the e4 pawn. That's why it's the most common move. How should we defend this pawn? Well, the move we're going to use is d3. Simply put, we've developed our bishop. Now we can play d3 because we're no longer blocking its path. Also, we're opening up the path for our other dark squared bishop. Now, I'm going to explain the plans we have in this opening because you're going to like it a lot. Even for playing in your tournaments, right? A totally logical move here for black is bishop to c5. In fact, players with less than 2000 elo, less than 1800 elo, usually make the same moves. Knight to f6, bishop to c5, as if it were an Italian game, right? That's why these two moves are the most common. Careful, they're good moves. They're developing naturally. We're going to continue developing this knight here, knight to c3. Remember well, when you play this bishop's opening, don't develop the f3 knight for now, but the c3 knight instead. Why? Because we usually have two main plans that you have to remember in this opening. One would be the move f4, okay? If the knight is on f3, we couldn't make this advance, and the other plan would be the pin with bishop to g5. We can use these two plans as it suits us. For example, if they castle directly here, a great move is bishop to g5, pinning this knight on f6. You have no idea how good this move is. Since we haven't developed the knight to f3, we've gained a tempo, because now we're threatening to jump with the knight to d5, putting a lot of pressure on this knight on f6. This definitely looks very dangerous for the black pieces, as they have a hard time defending themselves. I mean, if this pawn were on d6, they could play the knight from b to d7, but since this pawn isn't on d6, they can't come to defend this knight. Therefore, if they play d6, we could directly enter with this knight to squeeze them a lot. If they play knight to d7 afterwards, our plan would be to keep pressing, and I'm going to explain that to you now. But first of all, you should know something that will give you goosebumps. What happens if they try to kick out this bishop? Doesn't that seem quite logical? If they kick out this bishop, well, we could play bishop to a4, a very natural move to maintain the pin. However, here we have a wonderful move, the typical fishing pole with h4. In this opening, it works very well. Why? Because by not having the knight on f3, we have a clear path to bring the queen into the attack. Very good idea. I mean, why, chess teacher? Are we giving away the bishop, just so I understand? Well, simply, if they capture this bishop, so you understand, if they don't capture it, then the pin remains active, and they haven't achieved anything with the move h6. It's that simple, right? So what happens? If they capture, we recapture with the pawn h takes g5, and then we're threatening this knight. The knight that was the true defender of the king side, it doesn't just defend the h7 square, but it also defends these two squares, which are the entry points for the queen. I mean, the knight is being threatened, and when it moves, the winning move is queen to h5 with a tremendous battery. Rook and queen attack the knight, a knight that's gonna end up dying, And not only that, but here we're going to give checkmate anyway. I mean, if they're careless, obviously we give mate, but normally they'll try to escape. They can't escape with this pawn thanks to our bishop. See? This pawn is pinned. They might try to escape with the rook so that when we capture, they can escape with the king, and then when the queen comes over here, keep escaping with the king. So there's a way to finish it in a very easy way. Remember well, when they try to escape with the rook, all you have to do is queen takes f7. It's important to take here before the knight, forcing the king to move here now, and the easiest way to finish is by sacrificing our rook for the knight. Rook takes h7, check, forcing the black king to capture, and now, simply thanks to our bishop queen to h5, would be mate, since the king couldn't escape through the back or the front. It's that simple. E4, E5, we first play bishop to C4. It's important to bring out the bishop first. Knight to F6, we defend the pawn with D3, bishop to C5, and now knight to C3. Remember well, if they castle here, the winning plan is bishop G5. But what happens if they don't castle? Let's say, for example, they play the move d6, one of the moves I encounter most in this position. Since they've developed the knight and the bishop, now they want to try to develop their other bishop and their other knight. And the move d6 seems perfect. It defends the central point, clears the way for the light squared bishop, they can castle next, all this seems perfect. However, this is where our plan of 4 comes in, a very strong plan. Don't worry, if you don't remember the ideas and mix up terms or try to do bishop g5 or things like that, you'll also do very well. This opening is played very comfortably. However, here the strongest plan of all when they play d6 against you, which as you know is a very popular setup for the black pieces, f4 is an extremely strong move. What does f4 threaten? Well, the threats here are simple, and in fact, we have two. One would be capturing here, for example, playing knight f3 and putting a lot of pressure on this pawn here. Pay attention here to the great move we have by not having developed our knight, because if we had developed this knight, the pawn couldn't move out, right? With the pawn on f4, we can place the knight behind it, and both pieces are putting a lot of pressure on the e5 point, thus gaining a lot of space. In addition, we can capture, castle, and place our rook on this file along with the bishop to apply tremendous pressure with all the pieces on this point. All right, one threat is this, right? Capturing. Another threat is to advance. In this way, we shut in the bishop on c8, which can't go out further than d7. And not only that, but we gain a tremendous space advantage on the king side, right? So we have two clear threats. The first would be to capture and the second to advance. That's why many people decide to capture, but if they capture, they would simply leave us with a tremendous development advantage. We've developed our two bishops on very good squares, then we'll play knight f3 and castle, and once again we'll have the rook in a super favorable spot. So here, the move I encounter most, what is it? When I play f4. Well, the move I encounter most isn't capturing or letting themselves be captured or anything like that. The move I encounter most is knight g4. A move that at first glance, they always try to play against us. Many people are tempted to try to do this typical attack similar to the fried liver, right? Or what's this attack called, Mel? The Fegatello attack, right? Knight f2, attacking the queen and also attacking a rook. What they don't know is that this attack isn't a good attack against the bishop's opening. They'll think we're playing something weird. We haven't developed the knight, we haven't castled, we have a pawn here in a weird way. They'll think we're doing weird things, but really the ones playing in a weird way are them. They're uncoordinating their pieces. They only have two, and with two, they won't do anything. We continue with the brilliant move f5. Why is it so important to uncoordinate the opponent's pieces? It doesn't matter if they try the fried liver attack, attacking the queen, and attacking the rook, because here it's already too late. We have our pieces well coordinated, and the queen and the bishop can join the attack while their pieces can't get in anywhere. Here we continue as follows. They attack the queen and they attack the rook. We'll enter with the queen on h5, too late now for our opponent to defend. Thanks to our bishop on c4, very well placed, we're attacking checkmate in 1. They can't advance because it's pinned. Advancing here would be a huge mistake, because upon capturing, You couldn't recapture with the h-pawn since the rook is completely pinned. You'd have to recapture with the g-pawn. The king would be totally exposed to the file, and the variation would end up losing. That's why the most common move here to stop this point is short castling. At first glance, it seems like a good move, right? It defends both points with the king and the rook. However, they're already too late. There's no way to stop the attack of the white pieces. How should we continue? Well, here, the strongest response we have is the following. We bring one of our remaining pieces into the attack with the gain of tempo. Bishop g5 directly touching this queen on d8, which practically only has two squares, right? Queen d7 or queen e8, it really doesn't matter where it goes. It's exactly the same to us because we have a very clear dynamic advantage. That is, our pieces, watch out, knight, bishop, bishop, and queen are attacking the enemy king. While it's true, they can capture our rook, they can do whatever they want. However, we're already winning. We now enter with the piece we have left, knight d5. Many might think we're attacking this point, but no. What we're doing is, for example, it doesn't matter what they do. Look, they have an extra rook and knight. However, we have so much attack that they can't do anything. The winning move here is the double exclamation mark move. Whenever you want, you can pause the video to try and guess it. I'll give you 3 seconds if you want to practice. And the key move is knight f6, double exclamation mark. Obviously, this knight must be captured for 2 reasons. Check is being given, the queen is going to be taken, and checkmate will be delivered. One way or another, this knight must be captured, and once it's captured, there's no direct check, but there's the move bishop takes f6, pinning the enemy king, and quite simply, there's no move that stops this check and the subsequent mate on g7. For example, knight d6 attacking the bishop, it doesn't matter. Queen g5 check and queen g7 checkmate. If you're more aggressive players, I recommend that when they play knight f6 attacking this pawn, instead of the one we just mentioned, d3 defending, you enter a very interesting variation that I once mentioned on the channel, though not in such depth. The move is d4. Very, very, very interesting. It's true, we're not defending this pawn on e4 and they can capture it. But this is a mistake, friends, because after pawn takes pawn, d takes e5, this knight is going to be hard to get out. This knight is difficult to move back. For example, these two squares are defended by our great pawn on e5. Here it's covered by the bishop, here by the pawn, here it's not covered by anything, but it would have serious threat problems. I mean, if it tried to retreat now, we could come here threatening a lot, right? This knight has problems. So here, the most used move according to the database is bishop c5. Again, very interesting. I'm not going to say no, they're threatening this f2 point again. Thanks to these videos, you're starting to lose your fear of these kinds of threats, right? Many of you might be thinking here that you should play, for example, bishop d3, knight a3, trying to defend this attack from the black pieces. However, many times we just focus on defending when we actually have advantageous attacking positions. For example, here's an example, okay? You could sacrifice the bishop on f7, check, and now come in with the queen and you'd win back this knight, therefore winning an extra pawn, and not only that, but also the opponent's king would be totally exposed. This would be an example of how you could win without defending this point here. However, sometimes there are stronger attacks that don't even need to sacrifice pieces. For example, directly queen d5 in variations of the Scotch Gambit, those of you who've studied it know that this battery with queen d5 is very strong. We attack checkmate and we attack the mate. The intermediate move doesn't work. Of knight g5 defending, because we'd eliminate it, and then we'd enter on f7. That's why here the black pieces, for example, should castle. But what happens if they try to castle? Well, we can keep attacking. And how can we keep attacking? Well, for example, we could take this knight here. Alright, you'd be surprised to know what the most used move here is for the black pieces. The most used move of all is, before castling, capturing while giving a check. And that makes a lot of sense. I'll show you, because I'm sure many of you are thinking it. Here, when we play queen d5 instead of castling, they realize they can make this check, right? Because we're threatening checkmate, yes, but if we're in check, we have to move the king. But that doesn't worry us, since now we're still threatening checkmate, and once they move, we can capture this knight, right? What are the black pieces gained? A pawn, but now we're attacking a bishop that must certainly retreat. And not only that, but now we're launching a tremendous attack on the enemy king. First of all, we develop our knight to f3, for example, and as we can see, all the pieces are coming together to attack the enemy king. For example, the most common move here is c6, preparing two things: the retreat of their bishop, which isn't doing much anymore, and the possible right move. d5 to open up the position a bit, since we have the king in the center. It makes a lot of sense. However, they're not in time. The winning combination here is as follows: bishop d3, so that we threaten checkmate. Often, what do threats do? They cause weaknesses for our opponent. They must weaken themselves with what move? With g6. Obviously here, for example, f5 wouldn't be possible to stop the threat because we'd capture en passant and the threat would remain, right? They have to play g6. And what does that do? When they have their pawns on white squares, no one is defending the black squares, so the bishop can move in. Many of you might think bishop h6, a great move, and it certainly is, but here we're helping our opponent a bit. Much better is bishop g5, threatening a queen. We threaten the queen, and not only that, but here we practically have the game won with the next move, bishop f6. This is all starting to sound familiar, right? After the move d5, which is the most common, we move the queen to the attack. I'm going through all of this so that you understand how to win, because if I just show you the three opening moves, you won't know how to continue. I prefer to explain everything correctly. And we're threatening queen h6, winning with checkmate. Here, the only move that stops it is h5, but I'm going to let you think for 3 seconds about a wonderful move that ends up winning the game. Come on, let's see who finds it. You can stop the video, all of you who want to do the thinking exercise. The best move here is the brilliant queen sacrifice. Very hard to see, friends, very hard to see. Queen takes h5. Obviously, they must take the queen, because we're coming in with queen h8 checkmate. So when the queen is captured, look at what a wonderful move, huh? Knight g5, and the checkmate on h7 is unavoidable. The king can't move to any square, and not only that, but there's no way to give him an escape route either. So here, no matter what the black pieces do, we would simply play bishop h7, a wonderful checkmate. Of course, we just studied that by playing d4, this more aggressive variation. If they captured our e4 pawn, we'd come out ahead, but the correct reaction for black is to capture the d4 pawn. Chess teacher, you can't leave without telling me how to play if they give me the correct reaction. Well, very well. Here we wouldn't recapture immediately. It wouldn't be a bad move, but I recommend a much better one, which is now knight f3. A much better move. Chess teacher, you're going crazy and now you're leaving the other pawn here. Our opponent is up 2 pawns. Well, now we can get one back, right? So technically, we're down a pawn, but in exchange for that, in exchange for tremendous activity, the queen is active, threatening the knight, so we have the initiative. This knight must move. It can't be defended with d5 because we'd simply capture the pawn, so it has to move. We have the bishop and the knight out, and we're going to castle on the next move. For example, if they play knight to d6, which is the most popular response to threaten our bishop, we castle short. The situation is, we have 2 pieces, and the queen active, and we've already castled. Our opponent has all their pieces on the 8th rank, can't castle yet, and the knight is slowing them down a bit. Black's best reaction seems to be knight takes c4, thus eliminating our bishop pair and a brutal bishop. However, at this point, we would already have the game won. How about that? We already have the game won. The correct move isn't queen takes knight, which would still leave us with an advantage, but rather rook to e1, a great intermediate move. We check the king. How can they stop this check? With 2 moves? Well, they can give up the knight, but that would simply delay their doom by 1 more move, right? They can play queen to e7, giving up the queen, a monumental error. But bishop to e7 is also a monumental error. Why? Because it stops defending the g7 square. Queen takes g7 is going to win the game. Remember well, for now we are down a piece. Down a piece. They've captured our knight. Even so, we're threatening the rook, and now we finish it off with bishop to h6. And as you can see, checkmate is inevitable. What do you mean inevitable, chess teacher? If it's well defended, No, because after queen takes f8, it's checkmate. The king can't take it because of the bishop, and the bishop can't take it because it's pinned, thanks to our rook on d1. Look how strong that rook pin is. The sharpest among you will have noticed that when taking this pawn, instead of playing knight to d6, they can play knight to f6, right? Which is a very natural move and doesn't block them at all. Well, don't worry, because I'll show you a quick plan that will always work for you. Remember the idea as well, as you're going to win many games this way. We come to pin this knight with this bishop, right? We pin the queen. Very well, our opponent can do anything. The most sensible move, without a doubt, is bishop to e7. Defending against this very strong pin, otherwise we could start exchanging these pieces, and two doubled and isolated pawns on the f-file wouldn't be a good idea. And now we change the plan. Knight to c3, for what? Not just to bring more pieces into the attack, which is also true, but to castle long, friends. Very good idea. For example, things you should know about this opening. If they attack your queen, where should you place it? If they attack your queen, you should place it on h4. Why? Because it's extremely difficult to drive away. They can't drive it away from anywhere. Something they often try against me is h6, a move that's useless because they don't threaten our bishop since the rook is undefended. Therefore, a better move here would be, for example, castling, right? Now they could indeed play h6 afterwards, right? We castle long, placing the rook on the same file as the queen, a very good move. We're in a wonderful position, and from here, we're making very strong threats. For example, bishop to d3. You don't need to memorize all this, you just need to understand it so you can apply it in your games. We're threatening checkmate with the queen and bishop. All we'd have to do is bishop takes knight, removing this piece and delivering checkmate. This is the most obvious move of all. How can the black pieces try to save themselves from this situation? For example, by playing h6. Why? Because now, if we trade, what would happen? They wouldn't have queen takes h7 checkmate anymore, since this pawn would be blocking it. So how do we continue? Well, in a simple way. This way, we can even sacrifice the bishop. Bishop takes h6, pawn takes h6, and queen takes h6. So that now, one way or another, checkmate will be inevitable. It really doesn't matter what they do to us. We're simply going to move in with all of our pieces. They pin this knight, I don't care at all. I'm going to move in with the knight too, and you won't have any way to stop this checkmate. Practical example. If they come to take the rook, all we'd simply have to do is move in with the bishop. If they take with the knight, checkmate with the queen, and if they move the king, well, we could also deliver checkmate in more than one way. But why complicate things if here, instead of moving in with the bishop, we should think about which piece is in the way of the checkmate? The knight. So I'm going to eliminate it. If you capture it, I'll give you mate, and that's it. This knight can't move. And if they do anything else, it really doesn't matter to us, so we'll capture the knight ourselves, and when they capture back, now we can move in for the checkmate. In this case, we do queen h7 checkmate, king f8, and queen takes f7 checkmate. I hope you all loved this video. If you loved my way of explaining and all the concepts I've covered, I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a like. It costs you absolutely nothing. And it makes me very happy. If you like this board with coordinates, I'll bring more explanatory videos with it, since I love recording these types of videos, if you'll excuse the redundancy. Also, today I recorded while sitting here at the table, so I'm much less tired than usual. I've been able to explain things with much more clarity. I hope you love this video, friends, and we'll see you tomorrow, as always, with another new video. Goodbye.